Well, I hope you enjoyed your lunch and you are ready for an afternoon of learning and some action, not only in the board room but also beyond. So it is that time in our meeting where we have set aside to have our women's observance. Today we will hear the perspective from one of our most dynamic women that has been centered in this moment. We'll hear about our students' ability to live and learn and thrive. I want to remind you that this is the time for us to be encouraged, to be inspired, and to be convicted, to stand confident, knowing we are the educators and we are the social justice activists that our profession needs in this moment and that our students deserve always. To stand resolute knowing this union will work every day to ensure every student, Black, white, brown, indigenous, AAPI students who are marginalized and underserved, our LGBTQ plus students, those who are differently abled, all of them have the resources and opportunities and support they need, bless you, they need to soar into their dreams. To help us center ourselves, most especially in the role of women in achieving that vision, we have a true warrior for equality and equity and justice. It's in her DNA. A brilliant legal mind, a renowned voice on civil rights and democracy. Maya Wiley is the president. Yeah, give it up for Maya. Is the president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, a coalition that NEA is a proud and active partner in. It is charged by its diverse membership of more than 230 national organizations to promote and protect the human and civil rights of all people in the United States. Here to tell us more about this phenomenal advocate and my good sister friend is a woman who in her own right is a powerhouse. Yes, she is. Miss Stephanie Johnson. Yeah. Yeah, Stephanie chairs. Look at that love. Yeah, our Fulbright scholar, right? Yeah. Chairs our Women's Issues Committee. She joined as an NEA aspiring educator. You may not have known that. And of course, she was an active member at her local and state level. Today, of course, she joins us as a leader at the national level to help advance our important and powerful work. Please give it up for our Women's Issues Committee Chair, Ms. Stephanie Johnson.
Thank you, everyone. I stand here today before you as a product of the community who raised me in the rural South. The community of women I stand on the shoulders of, like our grandmothers, mothers, aunts, educators, and leaders who thought beyond themselves and sacrificed for the greater good. And today, we have the embodiment of that spirit. She never forgot what her calling was, a calling for public service and for social change. Today's speaker, Maya Wiley, is a nationally respected civil rights attorney and activist who has dedicated her life to the fight for equality and fairness. She is a visionary, truly what the movement, our movement, for education justice, economic justice, racial and social justice. How can she be anything but a leader who tells truth to power and is unyielding in making America right its wrongs? It's in her DNA, as our president said. She is the daughter of civil rights activists Retha Francis and Dr. George Wiley, a champion for the poor and the founder of the National Welfare Rights Organization. Maya continues that family calling as president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights and the Leadership Conference Education Fund. The Leadership Conference is one of NEA's most valued partners. Maya has been a litigator at the ACLU, NAACP, Legal Defense Fund, and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. She co-founded and led a national policy advocacy organization, the Center for Social Inclusion, now a part of Race Forward, another partner of NEA in the fight to end structural racism. As you can see, Maya more than fits the bill for any NEA engagement. But I would be remiss if I did not point out that for this occasion, the NEA Board of Directors, Women's Observance 2023, we truly have a trailblazer in our midst. You may know her as the go-to commentator for all things civil rights on NBC News. Or you may know that Maya, who also ran to be the first ever woman elected mayor of New York City. But did you know that even before that boss move, she made history as the first Black woman to be counselor to the mayor of New York, the Honorable Bill de Blasio, to be specific. I stand here emotional today. This is a dream come true. I am a daughter and granddaughter of women who fought in the movement that was not always recognized. There were sharecroppers, there were service leaders, servant leaders, ministers, missionaries to the community. So it's a dream come true. Team NEA, I ask that you stand with me and please join me in welcoming the poster person of girl power and Black girl magic, Miss Maya Wiley.
I'm not letting Stephanie sit down just yet because one of the charges I had was talk about women leaders. Well, I don't have to because this is women's leadership. And for Stephanie to say that this is the biggest honor of her life is to humble me. But I just want to say, for me, the biggest honor is to have anyone of Stephanie's caliber, character, or leadership say those words. And I say that to all of you because the truth about leadership, it is not about recognition. Because leadership that matters often isn't. And so I just want to say to every last one of you, all of us are leaders. And Stephanie, you honor me. Okay, and this one right here. This is the other one. So I just want to say this. When they said, give us, talk about women who are out here making a difference, we talk about Stephanie and all the Stephanies, but I just want to say, when we have leaders who hold the reins at a time when the horses are running wild, because we know horses are running wild. They done let them out the stables, chasing them down, and they're crazy. Yeah. Okay? I could call out some names, I won't do it yet. But I say that because so many women have been for too long denied the reins of power despite having been the ones always corralling the horses, saying, get back in your stable. And we have come to a time in the history of our country where there's much more recognition of the leadership too long ignored. But that Becky Pringle, for me, is a North Star about what it means to have the bravery, the courage, and the grit to take the reins, despite the fact that there are folks chasing the wild horses out the stable and say, we're going to rein y'all in, rein y'all right back in. But I just wanted to say that because Becky was actually the first principal I met with when I became president and CEO of the Leadership Conference. And it was the best first meeting, it was best second meeting, best third meeting. So. All right, now, so at risk of running over time, and I am going to try to stay on time, I will jump in, although there's so many other leaders to recognize. I also want to shout out Kim Anderson, Rocio Inclán. I want to just all the amazing leaders of NEA and the importance of NEA to the Leadership Conference and all the work we're doing on social justice, civil rights, but at its core, the fundamental and central demand of the civil rights movement has always been education. It has always been education, and there is a reason why. Because how do you have a democracy in the absence of the ability to participate? How? How do you have a democracy in the inability to do, and this is a quote from Septima Clark, and I'm going to come back to Septima Clark, an educator, who said, we need to be taught to study rather than believe, to inquire rather than to affirm, because that is central to democracy. And central to the ability to do that is education. And it is why, right now today, the challenge to democracy, the work we have to do to save it, the front line of attack is where? Education. The front line of attack to empower a few and deny the many the voice and the ability to identify our problems, shape them, and solve them. The fundamental role our educators play in our democracy is what is challenged. So I say that because Septima Clark also said something else. She said, I believe unconditionally in the ability of people to respond when they are told the truth. Which is why, as an educator, Septima Clark, who spent her summers educating, running workshops at the Highlander Center in Tennessee, central to labor organizing, central to civil rights organizing, is what the Highlander Center represented. But she lost her job. She literally was fired, not for what she was doing in the classroom, for what she was doing outside by creating another classroom called a workshop at the Highlander Center about organizing for racial justice and equality in the United States. The central tenement to our democracy is how you petition government and do it effectively. She lost her job for that. But what she had in Highlander, founded by a white man, Miles Horton, a Highlander from Tennessee, was allyship. Were the folks that came together and said, we got you, and therefore we have a job for you to use your talents as an educator to help us perfect this union. And she is the one who developed the idea of freedom schools in beauty shops. That said, oh, you want to keep people from voting by telling them they have to have certain answers to certain kind of questions that you don't want them to be able to answer, that you're denying them the ability to learn in school, and then you're going to make it a test to see if you will let them register to vote so that they can participate in democracy. Septima Clark did that, an educator, fired for educating, who found a different path because she had a community, she had allyship, and she had a field that came together around resistance to the very thing that was trying to deny us education and democracy. So why do I say that now when we're talking about the wild horses running crazy today? I shouldn't even call them horses because I like horses. So, shouldn't have done that. But I want to go back to Tennessee, because Highlander was based in Tennessee. Miles Horton founded it in Tennessee. Tennessee is actually one of the states banning books. Tennessee is one of the states where teachers are grossly underpaid. Tennessee is one of the states where if you're an educator, you're getting harassed for trying to do your job in the classroom if you make someone feel uncomfortable about our very challenging history. It's in Tennessee. It's in all our states. But think about that. Think about that. But I also want to link it to something else that's happening in our democracy today. Because, and again, I'm going to go back to history for a minute to come back to today. When I talked about education as being central, and obviously women, I should have started by saying I'm really intimidated to speak with you today, and I'm really mad at Merwin for raising any kind of expectation. I have told him that. I have. But in part it's because I have educators on both sides of my family. My grandmother, my mother's mother, was an educator. Taught grammar school. Her aunts taught grammar school. My father's sister, special education teacher till she died. Her daughter, my cousin, special education teacher. And this is the nature of being educators, right? My cousin, special ed, one of her students gets pregnant, has a baby. They're both living with her. Because that's what educators do. The job does not stop at 3 o'clock. Never even started at 8 a.m. when they start walking in a building. But I know that because, and I'm intimidated because my grandmother, when I used to send her letters, would send them back redlined. True story. But I say, but as a civil rights history, you know, it was, think about this. We are currently today in a battle to hold on to public education, right? Stephanie and I were just talking about this in South Carolina, where my grandfather's people from, enslaved in Camden, plantations in Camden, that in these states, right, vouchers, the fight that is pulling resources out of our schools at the very same time when we're seeing educators pay 20% less than it was in 1990. Right? When we talk about the future of our country and our democracy and our economy and our societies, our children, and we have this false fight as if the problem is our resources in our public schools, not pulling them out to put them in what essentially historically has been segregation academies. That's what that's represented in the South. But the fight in the civil rights movement was not just to make sure that black children freed from slaves could learn. Because guess who else couldn't? White children. Unless their parents owned slaves and property, they didn't have the resources to pay for education, which essentially was private in the South. There was no public education until black people were freed from slavery. And in Reconstruction, black people who then moved into state houses started demanding constitutional amendments that are the constitutional amendments I was litigating on in the ACLU in places like Louisiana and Alabama, saying you have a provision in your state constitution that provides a constitutional right to a fair and adequate education, public. If we hadn't ended slavery, which is the beginning of the civil rights movement, y'all, it didn't start in 1950. Did not start in 1950. But the reason we have public education as a national demand, as an expectation, is because of the civil rights movement that started with abolition, and because of all the black women who then became the people who taught in black schools and became part of the front lines that then created a demand so that white children started getting educated. I say that because today, the very strategies, and they are intentional, let us not be fooled. They are intentional. They are practiced. They are funded. And they are about power over, not power by. Power over us is about driving division and suggesting that if a black teacher outside of Atlanta, I'm going to call her name. Her name, when I can find her name, because I wrote it down. I do not know her, but it is an example of exactly what teachers are facing. I can't find it. But my point is, black woman right now, a history teacher outside of Atlanta, a history teacher, being told she can't do Black History Month programming. She has had to stop doing Black History Month programming. Another teacher in her school told, you cannot teach the hate you give, right? The Angie Thomas book, on book banned lists right along with Roberto Clemente and Toni Morrison and all the others. And one of the devastating things about her efforts in her majority white school outside of Atlanta, a school that's public, a school where those white children are getting a public education because of her ancestors, are told they shouldn't learn the history because the present day realities are too upsetting. But it is her colleagues that need to be the Miles Hortons of her school, because the threat to her ability or the other teacher's ability who wanted to teach the hate we give are the same people who are going to be fighting side by side with them for their pay, for their right to have a reasonable workday, for the right to be able to take care of their own families. There is a teacher in Kentucky, a white woman, selling her blood for $60 to cover her electric bill and her car payment every month. Selling her blood as an educator. That's what her paycheck is not allowing her to do in Kentucky. There's only one thing, and Highlander, the work of Septima Clark, the work of Miles Horton represented this, was to say the union movement and the civil rights movement are the movements that collectively will create and perfect this democracy so that we finally have an America that lives up to its ideals, which is that all of us can learn, that all of us can pay our bills, that all of us can live together in a world that we create together, that our challenges are shared and the solutions will be collective. And it is our educators every day that form the backbone, the spinal column, the nervous system of this human body that the society is supposed to be. So what do you think the wild horses do? They try to attach you to the reins and drag you down the road and tear you apart. So they say, if you teach the hate you give, which is a story written by a black woman after a black man, Oscar Grant, was murdered by police in the San Francisco Bay Area. Fictional tale of a young woman, young girl, I'm a mama, so she's a girl to me, witnesses her friend killed by police. And then her resistance, her standing up with her own voice in her own trauma, with her own experience, to demand accountability in policing. What is that? It's democracy. It is the right to petition government. It is the ability to take a problem you see and experience in a community and demand its solution of those who are powerful. And to say it has to come off a shelf and it cannot be taught. At a time when we watch Tyree Nichols, beaten to death by public servants, beaten to death in a system where public servants can believe that even with cameras, they will not be held accountable for a vicious beating caught on film. And how is we as a society, where we have 1,000 people killed every year by police, and you know so many of those killings, Philandro Castile, Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor, we know their names, but we can't teach the literature to express to students who don't have the experience what it feels like. What it feels like when Joe Biden got up on that stage last week in the well of Congress and said, I, as a white man, am going to try to explain to you what it means to be a mother who has to describe to their child what it's like to say, baby, you got to put your hands on that steering wheel. You have to be obsequious in the face of your constitutional rights being violated to live. It is personal, but it's also a problem for everyone. Because guess what? We're disproportionately killed, but we ain't the only ones. If your police force is not paying attention to the actual crime because it's policing race, or it's embodied, in this case, in its power over, not power for or by the people, we do not have a democracy. If our police in too many states earn $20,000 more a year than our educators, why do we expect to be safe? If you're in Arizona, if you're in Colorado, if you're in too many states, you are making up to $20,000 less a year than a badge and a gun, and I promise you ain't nobody telling them what to read. I promise you. I promise you that nobody is following them around, threatening them with criminal penalty for showing somebody a damn book that won a prize. I don't know anybody saying to teachers, oh, do whatever the hell you want in the classroom. We won't hold you accountable. We won't assess you to death. We won't torture you by saying we don't trust you doing your job. And oh, no, we won't second guess you when you make a decision about some activity you think is going to bring joy to your children. My kids went to public school. I didn't see that. And I never heard anybody in our school building, hard as my kids' teachers worked, told, you do whatever you want. We trust you. So I say this to you. You are and always have been fundamental to everything we hold dear and centrally to our democracy and our future. And you are under attack because you are powerful. You are under attack because the only way to have power over people is to deny you the ability to do your job that you love, that you sacrifice for, that you pull out of your own wallet for. Yes. And where you struggle every day just to say, don't put a book off the shelf. No, don't take this from our kids. But this is the other thing I want you to know. You have to stand up for one another, just as we have to stand by you. Because when we hear our educators pitted against each other, like this school outside of Atlanta, the reminder that we have to have is it's only because of our ability to say, you will not divide us by race. You will not tell us we shouldn't learn each other's pain. You will not say our history doesn't matter for understanding why we need to read The Hate U Give, why we need to read Roberto Clemente, why we need to understand why there are reservations with Native people on them, why we need to understand how white children got the right to learn to read even if their parents didn't earn property. If we don't understand why the divisions work today, then we don't understand how we're all in this together. And the one thing I will say about the leadership, not just of the NEA, not just of all of you, but the leadership we will share together. Because as the leadership conference, we are not just unions. We are not only educators. We're actually people who say, we, and I mean this with conviction, we are the majority of this country. Those wild horses running wild are but a few. And the reason union matters, the reason you have power, the reason they're trying to break you, whether it's card check and trying to fight the dues, whether it's trying all this stuff, is because we have power collectively. And when we collectivize it, we win. We win, and they know it. They know it. So I'm going to call out, I'm wearing purple for Shirley Chisholm, and I didn't get the memo on the Eagles. But I will call out SEIU right now, too, because when we fight, when we fight, when we fight, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And you know what we're going to do? We're going to do it together because we are the majority of this country and can't nobody turn us back. There's never been a black woman in this country that said, fine, run all over me. And I don't know the white women who are going to say, yeah, tell me when to have babies and force me to have them. I don't know the Latina that says, yeah, tell me I don't belong. I don't know any woman or any of the people who love us who are gonna say that we don't count, we don't matter, and we're not united. And I just want to thank you for the inspiration you give me. I want to thank you for educating my children. I want to thank you for my traumatizing redlined letters. And I want to just say this. Finally, and consistently, you are our future because you are teaching our children, and that is why we will win.